Stay curious, right? Curiously honest. All right. To say, I haven't the foggiest idea, and I am willing to feel my heartbeat really fast and stick with it, to allow my affect. This professor that I went to study with said, to become a master of your craft, you have to be able to hold your affect and your intellect without privileging one for the other. So I need to be able to hold what's in my head and what's in my heart. F. Scott Fitzgerald said, true genius, the hallmark of true genius, be able to hold two warring minds at the same time, right? Paraphrased. You don't have to do the stuff that I did, but what you have to do is be forthright with how it impacts you. What's the affectual experience? Can I sit with it and go, my God, I don't know what that was, but I'm willing to take the chance to go and explore it, to understand it, to unpack it, so I can make it a part of who I am, so I can, in the service of others, right? The next successful company, just a thought, will be the one that can maintain its humanity, right? That we're just not beheld to technology, but we're able to hold our humanity in a way that we are not lost. We don't feel overwhelmed. We don't feel dismissed. We don't feel, in my mind, if you've ever seen the movie Matrix, that we're plugged into this larger machine, but that the Matrix was literally about unplugging to find one's humanity again. And I don't want to be apocalyptic at all about how this happens. But what I am suggesting is that those organizations that can find their human and the integration with this technology, which to me is a tool, it is not alive. With human-centered design, what you end up with is the concern of the human, the understanding of the human, the capacity of the human to integrate change. And it's not being forced on them, they're being engaged with it.
Hi, and welcome back to New World in the Making. In this episode, I sit down with Ty Smith, systems thinker, innovation builder, and leadership consultant with a long and diverse trajectory across public service, academia, and organizational transformation. We sit down to talk about what it really means to innovate in times of uncertainty. We explore how to create work environments where vulnerability and humility are key, where people feel actually safe to experiment, and where innovation isn't just this buzzword, but a way of being. We also look at the future of work, what new generations are really asking for, what truly drives purpose, and how we can design systems that are both human, especially with all the AI that's coming up, and regenerative. So, let's dive in. Just a quick one, and I promise quick one, before we dive into the episode. I really want to take a moment to just say thank you for being here. And to keep this work alive and help it reach even more people, I need your help. Just by hitting that subscribe button, you're becoming an active part of this new world in the making. And you're enabling this conversation to grow into directions we can't even imagine yet. So thank you truly. And now, for real, let's dive into today's conversation. Ty, thanks so much for joining today. It's a massive honor to have you here.
Well, I'm honored to be here. I was saying to my wife this morning that, oh yeah, I have this podcast and it's an international podcast. Somebody reached out to me and I don't know how she found me, but she did. But I am very honored that you did. So I appreciate it.
No, thanks a lot. We have so much to cover today. I mean, I just told you when I was doing the research, I was very impressed by how many things you've done. So maybe before we dive into all the wisdom you can share with us, maybe can you give a bit of a background on your personal story? How did you get to do what you do today?
Yeah, no problem. So I am from a very small town in the central part of Pennsylvania, in the USA. And I grew up even though you may feel later on like an extrovert, there was a part of me that was very introverted. And I think it was mostly because of the community I grew up in. I was a very small minority in a very majority environment. In other words, in my hometown that had 2,500 people, that was 1 mile long and about a third of a mile wide. They said there was probably 200 black folks, and I could not find them. And most of them I was related to. And so I always struggled with trying to understand my identity because of my familial identity was very strong. I had no problem with that. But my social identity was weird. And so I grew up in that environment, struggled with it. So not only about my kind of cultural identity, but my kind of personal identity. I was a smart kid that back in the 70s, they didn't have such a designation, at least where I grew up, as talented and gifted. But I remember reading physics books when I was 4 and 5 years old, like college level physics books.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, I think the word is precocious. And I still remember being in the house that I grew up in, looking at these books, learning about Bernoulli's principle and refraction and all that stuff. I understood it, but I didn't understand it. But I had very smart people and very loving parents that just at that point in the very early 70s, because I'll be 58 at the end of November, the very early 70s did not have. Yeah, yeah. I'm almost a boomer, but I'm very early Gen Xer, right? And so uh, I took what I kind of hid myself, right? I kind of hid who I was, and I got along. Went to undergraduate school. I was an athlete, but I was also a theater kid. I was smart, but yet I dumbed myself down. So it's I spent a lot of time learning how to balance these ideas about who I was and what I meant to the world. I was one of those kids that struggled so badly, I ended up flunking out of college. But everything is supposed to be what it is. I at some point became a police officer. So I was 18 years old. They gave me a gun, a badge, and handcuffs, and told me to go out
Wow.
and do my thing in the world, which is different than joining the army at 18 because when you join the army, you're being told what to do and you execute against an order. But when you're a police officer, that's not a luxury. You have to use your own judgment about how you deal with the world. And so I learned a tremendous amount about how to engage in the world, right? How to build that out. I did that for 4 years. I won't do it again, but I learned a tremendous amount about what it means to deal with people and to deal with people, as I engage them in what it means. Went to graduate school in Washington, D.C. I told you my town is a mile wide and a third of a mile deep, right? So it's very, very small. There was no traffic lights. There was always stop signs.
Wow.
So I go to Washington, D.C., which is a very different environment. I go to what's called a historically black college university, Howard University, fairly famous around the world. And I meet very smart people from all over the world, right? From all over the place, from West Africa, from the Caribbean, from the United States. And I learned that it was okay to be smart. It was okay. I didn't have to go and hide myself. Oh, by the way, the school that I flunked out of, I actually went back and I became part of the leadership structure. I changed majors, blah, blah, blah. The major that I changed from undergrad then became my graduate major. So I go to graduate school, and this is where I really, really learn about how to engage with people. I had a job that required me to work with children who were very, very emotionally disturbed. And I had a professor, I was observing all of this stuff, and I had a professor who wrote something on the board that he talked about social vortexes. And it was at that point, I was like, it was like somebody just opened up a window and a breath of fresh air just came and hit me full in the face. And I said, I understand that. I know what that is. I see it every day. I see how kids get sucked into roles. I see how staff get sucked into roles. I see how families get sucked into roles. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And he taught me a lot. Unfortunately, he passed way too early, but it allowed me to create a space for me to really understand how social systems work. I went from that to still working with kids, to working with institutions, organizations. to where I'm at now, where I do things around how do we set systems of innovation? How do we set systems of social change? How do we create systems where disparate parties that would never ever talk to one another find something in common to begin a conversation? So when they pull together, I think on a personal side, um, it is the absolutely right thing to do. But on the personal / professional side, organizations go, "Oh, what? What does that mean? uh, we don't understand. We just pay for you to do this." So
That is, wow. Okay. So many questions already. Can you dive a bit before we go into all these social systems and how do we build those and how do we create those systems that allow different parties to come together and all that, which I think we really need desperately today. What about those roles in these systems? How do we get to know our own roles within systems, and how do we break free of those roles if needed?
So roles are an interesting. I know when in kind of our conversation before this actual podcast talked about um, an organization I've been involved with for 30 years now. As a matter of fact, they made me a fellow in the organization. It's called the A.K. Rice Institute for the Study of Social Systems, and literally
Okay.
that's what we do. We just don't study an
Yeah.
individual's how an individual engages, but we understand that individual engagement in terms of role and what it might mean in a larger system. And so
Mm-hmm.
roles are both offered, you're offered a role,
Yeah.
and a role is taken. Think about your family
Mm-hmm.
system. I am the oldest.
Yes.
I am the oldest in my immediate family. I have an older sister who didn't grow up with us, but in my immediate family, there's three of us. And I had a
Okay.
role, my brother had a role, and my sister had a role. My role as the
Yeah.
oldest was to be peacekeeper. My
Mm.
my brother, who is 3 years younger than me, his role was to just he was just getting all kinds of stuff. But there was roles. Part of that was who he was as a person, like his own interpersonal makeup. At some point, you could probably say he had ADHD way before people could define
Uh-huh.
ADHD because he was always into
Yeah.
something. He was always into something. Because he was always into
Yeah.
something, it kept me from getting into trouble, right? That was his job to get in
Same.
trouble. My job was like, I see it wasn't me. I ain't do that. That's on him. My sister, who was adopted, who was adopted very early. I think Tracy came to live with us when she was like 2 or 3 years old, and
Okay. Wow.
she had special needs, and so she took up a role, even though it wasn't one that she really understood that she had. It was a role that she took up, and I think that was both again given and enacted. I think is probably the better word.
Yes.
And so, even in organizations, we have roles, right? The
Yeah.
problem in
Yeah.
organizations is that uh, people bring those roles that they grew up with and they bring them to their job, right? One of
Fascinating.
the things that I as a person who has studied for 30 years organizational processes is that when somebody
Yeah.
said, "We like the family," I'm like, I don't like that because my family is horrible while your family is great. And so if we come in and we see our organizations as family, unless we unpack what that system we're bringing in, the role that I took up in that system, I could do all kinds of crazy stuff. I could engage in all kinds of just what the world is going on kind of stuff. And so somebody else comes into our new organization, and they're like, "What is wrong with you people?" Well, that's just how we act. No, that's not how people get stuff done. But the thing that saves people in role really is
Yeah.
how do they understand the task of the
Uh-huh.
organization. Why was it put together? What is it there to do?
Okay.
And unless that kind of is explicit, then we bring in all those other things from our outside lives, right? I used to belong in an organization like that, and I come in. What does that mean? And it gets scary, right? It can get very scary to unpack how those human systems work, right? To be able to sit
Yes.
with that uh, and try to make sense of it. And it gets even more tenuous when our organizations are not family organizations, which is to survive and make a next generation, but to do in things like innovation, right? And to make
Mm.
change in the world, to bring a product to market, or to make a social difference, to have an impact on a community, or to make people's lives better. That's when it gets really, really difficult.
Yeah. And how do we become aware of these roles? Like you've seen that in college and learned with the kids and then understood, okay, what is my role? But how do we do that in these organizations that we are kind of thrown in and then we're just like figuring things out as we go? And how do we become aware of these roles? What are maybe questions that we can ask ourselves? Or how do we navigate this?
Well, I think the very first thing you have to do is have some courage, right?
Mm.
Because the kind of
Yes.
questions you have to ask is things like, you remind me of, and as soon as you look at, you remind me of, oh, that's not that person. Okay, so what is it? If that's not the person, that means it's the behavior.
Uh-huh.
And so, what is my relationship to behavior that I'm actually putting on the person, right? Because the
Right.
person reminds me of so and so. Who cares? It's
Yes.
the behavior that you're
Yes.
associating with. And if you can't disassociate the person and the behavior, then that person gets sucked
Mm-hmm.
into a role and then you treat them as if that's them,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
They're that thing, that imagination, that story. Um, it's one of the things that I do as that kind of very quick intervention in my head, and sometimes with people is, can you move the needle off of okay, show you how old I am, a record player, right? Vinyl, you have to move the needle off of that same groove because it just goes round and round
Right.
and round. And so how do we move the needle enough
Yeah.
to make sure that we're listening to a new part of the story,
Right.
right? You have to have the courage to
Right.
move it, because without the courage, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't know if that's not, it's self-fulfilling cycle, right? I knew it was going to be like
Yes.
this. I
Yes.
knew
It
they were going to
is.
say that. I knew. You didn't know, because what do the Buddhists say? You can't cross the same stream twice, right?
Uh-huh.
So every interaction is a new and is generative in its possibility. Every interaction is
Right.
generative in its possibility. But if we don't see it as generative, it will be a replicate of what our past experience, because as the saying goes, it's the devil I know versus the devil I don't.
Yeah, no, it's very liberating in a way as well to know that you can break free from those things, you know? And then it's, oh, you can be surprised by this other person and it's not a vicious cycle of repetition.
That was the word I was looking for, vicious cycle. But
Hmm.
but what but the liberation is also
Yes. It is super scary. Super scary.
right, because the it requires me to take up a new role,
Right.
right? To say I have now broken free from the constraint
Yeah.
that has been put on me, that I'm so frustrated about, but I don't know what is on the other side of
Yeah.
the freeing moment.
Yeah. So how do we create then these environments that it allows us to be and have that courage and be brave enough to break free from those roles and investigate what kind of role do I want to maybe have now?
I think that that's the nature of leadership, right?
Okay.
Um, Leadership is I think, in some ways, at least how you're articulating it here, is the capacity to create an environment where people can come together in in an effort to explore without recrimination, right? I
Mm.
don't know. I think is three of the strongest, most contemplative words in the English language, right? I don't know. I have no
Mm.
idea. But I'm willing to take the chance to explore it. And that's what leaders
Yeah.
do. The notion of humility in leadership is it actually is probably stronger than the strong man. No, it's not probably. It is stronger than the strong man
Mhm.
because it says, I don't have all the answers and I need you all to help me formulate a construct that is strong enough that moves us out of our current position to another position. There is a gentleman, he's actually in Europe, who does a lot of writing around leadership that I follow, is Manfred Keats de Vries. And he is a powerful, powerful thinker. And one of the things he talks about is narcissism in leadership, which I really appreciate. That there's some ways you need to be a narcissist to lead, right? I need to be like I have to have some sense of confidence that I can do this. But when you get
Mhm.
to a point where it's malignant, where only I can do this, is when things happen,
Right.
where bad things
Yeah.
happen. And I
Yeah.
think leaders who show up and understand that I am I am creating an ecosystem, creating an environment, creating a way of thinking that allows others to bring to bear
Yeah.
how they see the world, how they engage the world is very powerful. Are you familiar with the term psychological safety? If that rings a
Yes.
bell, it's so interesting. Um, uh, most I think most folks are saying psychological safety, unless they've really studied, like, oh, you want to make everybody, just be fine and, you know, I won't get hurt. It's not about that. We know that. It's
Yeah.
about creating a space where I can be freed up to say what I have to say without the recrimination, without the, you did this and you need to shut up
Uh-huh.
and just follow direction. I think great leaders provide a space for psychological safety. Um, Amy Edmondson, who has popularized in a lot of ways the whole notion of psychological safety. I don't think it was a dissertation. I read a really good article about how she created and crafted this notion of psychological safety. She talks about um, a situation in a medical surgical unit where you have the nurse and you have the anesthesiologist. And in a psychologically unsafe environment, talk about leadership and creating these spaces for people to do good work in their roles. Uh, a psychologically unsafe environment has the role of the nurse not saying anything to the anesthesiologist when the nurse in her role is there to be another set of eyes for the anesthesiologist. A psychologically
Mm.
unsafe environment, the nurse says that I'm not saying anything because the last time I said something to this anesthesiologist, I got beat up. I got yelled at.
Yeah.
I got belittled. Right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
in role, which means that she is now not doing in the best interest of the patient. She's doing what's in the best interest of her to maintain her or his um, standing in the system. I am
Mm.
the nurse anesthetist, and that's all I can be. And I follow whatever the nurse or the anesthesiologist tells me to do. In a
Yeah.
psychologically safe environment, the nurse anesthesiologist could then go and say, you're about to kill the patient. That's too much oxygen, or that's too much anesthesia, or something. My job in my role is to create a task to in line with the task is to make sure that you don't do it because you have another set of eyes. Because you as the anesthesiologist now, well, you're monitoring all of this stuff. And you may not
Yeah.
be aware. In a psychologically safe environment, the anesthesiologist says, we are a team and we have a task. And the task is to make sure this patient gets off this operating room bed, makes it back, goes home safe. Thank you. I am still the anesthesiologist. You're still the nurse anesthetist, but we had different roles in the service of, and this is an important foot stomp, in the
Mhm.
service of the task.
Right. Right. So what you're saying is also that the purpose needs to be very clear And then leadership needs to be very providing this environment of psychological safety. What skills or values or things that leadership could take on to create that space?
Humility. I don't know everything. Remember, one of the most powerful words in the English language are I don't know. Right. Um, and at the same time, and they may seem uh, in conflict with each other, humility and confidence in my skills. Right.
Mm,
So
love
being
that.
able to hold the paradox, uh,
Yeah.
uh, a, a skill of asking questions, curiosity, right? So humility, curiosity, being curious about what's going on, being curious about your
Yeah.
fellow people, being curious about the process, being curious about the environment, being curious about your system that you're engaged in. Um, Humility, curiosity. I had another one. Systems thinking. Being able to think
Mm,
not just in a one-to-one interaction, but a one-to-many interaction. I
mm,
don't necessarily call it, I won't say I'm a good leader because I think that is an assessment that people will give me whether or not I can lead.
mm.
But
Okay.
one thing
Mm-hmm.
they can't say is that I don't think in systems, and I don't think and the fourth one I think is being able to think beyond to linear, like the next step,
Right.
right?
Yes.
So, and what I mean by that, a good leader, I think, has the capacity to go, it's not just 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. It's 1 + 1 + 1 is 111,
Uh-huh.
right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
systems. Like, what are the interactions? Can I remain curious
Yes.
about it? And can I have the humility to understand that I don't know everything because there's 8 billion people in the world and
Mm-hmm.
my little corner of the world might have 15 people on my team. There's no way. There's in communications theory, I think it's n times n+1 or something like n+1 times n, or there's some formula, and I can't remember the name of I can't remember the name of the law, and I'm going to screw up the formula, but it is a square of the number of interactions. So the more people that you include in your group, there is an exponential net of interactions that you're engaged
Okay.
in. And so
Yeah.
3 people is easy. Me, you, and the other person. That's no problem. But you get to
Right.
10, now it's exponential.
Mm,
And there's no way that you can manage all of those without thinking in systems and have the humility to go, I have no idea what's going on. I need input from the team to make a decision. I will make the decision
mm-hmm.
because that's my role. That's my job. That's what I'm getting paid for. Somebody's designated me the leader of the team. But without that, I am making a decision that ecologically does not make sense.
Right. 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 And how do we then, you were mentioning these systems that create value, create these social interactions that can maybe put us into a position where we come together and reevaluate what we maybe thought of each other before. How do we create those environments inside of organizations that are ultimately looking for profit and where it's not really a main task really to have great leadership and a clear purpose of what to do exactly, but it's like, well, we need to, at the end of the day, we just need to make money. So especially in these changing times, is there space for innovation, for this kind of leadership, for this kind of mm, creation of systems where all these really beautiful things could emerge?
I don't think we have a choice, right?
Mm,
So,
right.
are you familiar with Metcalfe's law? Yeah, Metcalfe's law, which is the square root, the not the square root. Metcalfe's law was the one I was talking about. It is, it's it's silica chips. Like there was a I can't remember the gentleman's name right now who maybe I do have it right, but anyway, that that the change between a chip was like 6 months. Like you could change every 6 months, it would get smaller and smaller. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. When you have Nvidia worth $5 trillion and they're putting I don't know how many transistors on a chip, in between the size of my finger, right, my two fingers. There, you're moving beyond what in 1970 was even imaginable. 1980 was even imaginable.
Right.
And so the world is
Totally.
changing rapidly. I think that
Rapidly.
the fifth one that I didn't talk about, and I think for leaders, particularly now today, as we know that the world is changing so rapidly, is the spirit of experimentation, which is
Mm,
the heart of innovation. The spirit,
right.
metered experimentation, but experimentation. And so, uh, if a leader in today's world can experiment at the same time they're trying to exploit what they're building, they are
Yeah.
in danger of being irrelevant, right? And
Uh-huh.
so, what do I mean by that? Um, there's a gentleman who his name is Alex Osterwalder. Shout out to Alex, who's been doing a lot of
Mm,
work around the business model innovation world. He's
mhm.
been doing it for 20 years. Um, that says that the next generation, and you always listen, he's not the only one, but I really like the way he talks about it in terms of explore and exploit. The ambidextrous
Mm,
organization is another way that we talk about it. That at the same time, you have to be able to exploit your current capacities, your current capabilities, right? Because that's what
right.
got you here. But as Goldsmith was said, what got you ain't going to get you there. It's just there's a leap in
Mhm.
value that you have to figure out because the world is
Yes.
changing so fast that if you say, well, I'll just bring in everything I used to do and we'll make it fine and we'll just continue money. The startups that I work with, when they say, oh, I got the secret sauce, I got the next best thing, I'm like, no, you don't. You don't have it. Because if you thought about it, trust me, somebody else has thought about it because you're dealing in degrees of freedom left and right of your idea, right? Some
Yeah.
that's it. And you're trying to find your neck in the market. And the only way that you can get into that space in the market is to experiment and explore your way into that market. And so
Mhm.
the way that we think, I think, the way that we get in and still create value from an
Yeah.
innovation standpoint is to really
Yes.
drop in and to drop in a way that we embrace leaders, embrace experimentation.
Uh-huh.
Right now, we don't have to do experimentation just willy nilly, just kind of waving our hands. Oh, we're just doing it. You have to have a strategy. You have to have a way that says, you know what, we're our strength, the thing that we're really good at, while we know other folks are going to catch up, we're not leaving that. We're trying to figure out what do we say no to more than what we say yes to, which is
Okay.
like the science, the basic science of strategy. Say more no than yes. Because what
Mm,
you end up with is yes, we can do this, yes, we can do that, yes, we can do that. And if you add too much stuff into your ecosystem, now you start to clog it. It becomes calcified because it has no room to move, right? It can't figure out, is it this or this? Like, no, we did everything. Well, if you're doing everything, what are you really good at? What makes you different in the market? And so being
mhm.
able to extract and say, we will win here, we will do this way, we will continue to experiment to see whether or not, right? Everything I tell folks, everything you ever wanted to learn about how to do this in business, you learned in elementary school science, right?
Hmm.
I had an idea, I created an experiment, I didn't run it for long, I got some data and helped me make a choice, right? And
Right.
so the innovation space is in the experimentation from a leader standpoint is to create that context so you can start to make good decisions, right?
Uh-huh.
The space of the leader who says I don't know is not really saying I don't know, it's I don't understand, help me understand from the rest of your
Mm,
team. Give me some
yeah.
hypotheses about what that looks like. Let's run an experiment, low technical, high learning experiment before we spend a lot of money. Because I, as the Caesar, the ultimate the deal maker, say we're going to do this. with relatively little information about why you're doing that, I think is foolhardy, because you
Yeah.
could really drive your company down a path with no relevance to what the market needs, just because
Yeah.
you were convinced. And that happens very rarely. You can look at historically in the last 30 years, the companies that could say, no, we actually are onto something because we're creating something that people don't really understand. Apple,
Mm.
probably OpenAI, maybe Amazon, right? Everybody else was trying to figure that stuff out.
Yeah.
And even those
Yeah.
guys experimented, right? Even they experimented.
Yeah. Because I mean, I guess you need to find that thing that the possible customer wants without them already knowing, right? So, I mean, I loved how you talked about in one of your other podcasts about the creative distraction and Cirque du Soleil,
Ah,
and
yes.
maybe
You did the
you could
homework,
explain.
didn't you?
Well, you have a lot of interesting things to talk about.
Well, it's interesting. Creative destruction. There's a really good shout out to, uh, as a matter of fact, this book here. Oh, let's see if I can pull it. Beyond Disruption. It's kind of backwards, but Kim and Marbon, their thing is, you see how I have it right here, and it wasn't planned. It was just happened to be on my bookshelf. Um, uh, their thing is the blue ocean, right? That's what they're famous for. Those two, and that is the the theoretical is really about creative destruction. That's Shumturian economics. In order to gain something, you gotta let something go, right?
Mm.
It is Buddhist in its basic form, right? Buddhism. You got to let it go in order to discover something else. And so what
Yeah.
happens in ecosystems, I think, organizational ecosystem, is the refusal to let stuff go. Like
Uh-huh.
what got us here, right? What got us here ain't going to get us there. What got us here? What got us here do we not take with us into the future because the market doesn't care anymore? It just doesn't
Yeah.
care, right? And if it goes, we think it's great, but the market is
Mm.
like, but if we let some of that go, we are now in a position to discover additional and new non-commodity environments, non-commodity opportunities.
Mm.
What will this allow us to do that we hadn't even thought about because we're so anchored to the past? But if you take a
Mm.
strategic look at that and say, what does it mean for us to win in the future? And what's the difference between where we win in the future and what we're anchored to, what we're known for? Well, some of the
Yeah.
stuff we know for, people like, yeah, I need that. But other stuff, they're like, I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. But the leaders of the future will be able to say, you know what? Not the future because they're here now. The leaders who
Yeah.
understand this now that can let go of the anchor of the past to create new
Mm.
opportunity in the future are willing to let go. Creative destruction, make that happen. Cirque du Soleil said, we ain't a circus. We're a theater that happens to travel that looks like a circus, but we can create something that people haven't even seen. And so I
Mm.
did this personally in workshops that I've done where I said, how many of you ever been to Cirque du Soleil? You can't go. How many of you would go back? How many of you realize that those tickets are expensive? How many of you will still go back? They continue to raise their hand. Why? Because they understood, those people in the room that I taught, they understood that it was such a powerful experience that they were willing to take money out of their pocket that they would spend on something else because it created a differentiated experience that they could not find anyplace else. And the data
Yeah.
looks at it in America. Tradition, traditional circuses that have been around for 100 years don't exist anymore. Gone,
Yeah.
right? Because they couldn't keep
Yeah.
up. Nobody
Of
wanted to see
course.
it. It's too pricey.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Okay, they had better, tigers, and these guys had better aerialists, and who gives a crap?
Yeah. So where do you see that innovation going? Into what direction with all that new developments in tech and environmental crises? Where is the value created right now?
Um, my sense is that that part of the creative destruction that has to go on
Mhm.
has nothing to do with science, has nothing to do with technology. It is everything to do with systems and people inside a system. And so
Mm.
what's going to have to happen, I think, and this
Okay.
is
Yeah.
obviously in one person's opinion, hopefully somewhat informed, but one person's opinion, is that there needs to be a reckoning between the technology and the science and what people's perception about the past. So, for instance, in
Hmm.
sustainability, the
Yeah.
evidence is mounting that electrification and renewables are are the way to go. And as battery technology gets better, smart grids get better. Machine learning and artificial intelligence can figure out where energy needs to go and how you load balance. And I mean, all that science. And I mean, I talk to people, not every day, but this is the stuff that some of my friends who are in venture capital, that they're working on. They're thinking about it. But you have people like my folks. My mom is 83, 82, and my dad is 83. That have this, but I only know gasoline. I only know because we've created a system of petroleum stations where I can go and get gas, and I don't have to worry about it. I get freaked out.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah. Yeah.
the part that we're going to have to overcome in the future, young people like you, like my son, who is an engineering student, mechanical engineering
Mm.
student, is to really understand where the market is and understand what lies beneath these anxieties. How do you
Mm.
unpack that? How do you get people to think innovatively has almost nothing to do with the technology? The technology is going to
Mm.
happen. Here in the United States, there are upwards to 1,600 patentable ideas that come out of our national science laboratories every year. 1,600
Mhm.
patentable ideas that are just sitting on the shelf. The science is there's no gap in the science. It is the market. So the innovation is in the market. It's not in the science.
But how, okay, yes. So that is one thing that I've been myself struggling a lot with. Like, it's exactly what you're saying. The innovation is there, all the ideas are there, tech is there, but then we still struggle to see really anything implemented, anything really taking the lead in all these innovations. How do we make innovation um really stick around? It feels like it's taking forever to have the renewable energy system being changed. How do we do that?
So you 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 can't. One way to do it is through the work of Clay Christensen. And for your audience, he's the guy who wrote The Innovator's Dilemma. He did all this innovation work. He's out of Harvard or MIT, one of the two. His last book was Competing Against Luck. He's since passed. He's no longer with us. But his work, I think, is seminal to what you're offering. One of the things
Mm.
that there's another gentleman that on my podcast that we've interviewed, uh, most Modest, I think is his name. I'll remember his name soon enough. But he and Clay did a lot of work on the job to be done, right? Why do people hire products? Which I think is a fascinating idea. Uh, Clay Christensen had a very famous video called "The Job to Be Done of a Milkshake," right?
Mm.
And so he talks about being requested by a fast food company here in the States to help them get better milkshake because they were getting like 50% of their milkshakes were being sold before 8 o'clock in the morning, right? It's a milkshake. Like who buys milkshakes in the morning? And so they
Yeah.
try to work around the edges of a requirement. Is it has to be more viscous, less viscous, more tasty, less tasty, more flavors, less flavors. Didn't have any impact at all, even with those experiments. Now, experimentation. this fast food company did their job. They experimented around what they thought people why they were buying it. But when they went and actually worked with the people themselves, the customers, this is the innovation. Why do you buy at 8 o'clock in the morning? Well, it beats this and it beats that. It beats, bagels. It beats candy bars. It beats fruit. And I have a long drive to work, and it only requires one hand. And I can do whatever I need to do, and I'm not hungry. It satisfies me. I hire it. I hire it because it gets the job done better than anything else that I have to spend my money on. And remember, it's about innovation in the market. The innovation only can be in the market if people are willing to buy it. When I work with my startups, a very simple phrase that I use, and I stole it from the godfather of the lean startup movement, Steve Blank. And it's the only thing I paraphrase. The only thing that matters is what people buy. Everything else is a hobby. The only thing that matters. So you can have the best innovation possible, but if nobody buys it, it doesn't really matter. It was just a great science experiment, or it was a great thought experiment. Who cares? So that means you have to get out and you have to talk to people.
Right.
Figure out what they're trying to do.
Yeah. And how do we, because we talked also when we prepped for this podcast, we talked about entrepreneurship, how to make entrepreneurship more accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
I loved how you also mentioned that in another podcast where you were talking about how to maybe create universities where the students are by default prepped to be entrepreneurs and from there take things on, which I find very fascinating because for me it was quite interesting, shocking to see that in business schools we're just prepped to be hired by a company, and there is no real ecosystem to start your own company, start your own business. It requires funding. It's basically for the privileged students to then be able to do this. How do you see that, and what would you propose to change?
Entrepreneurship isn't for everybody, and that's okay. It's absolutely okay because it requires a certain kind of personality that is okay with hearing a lot of no. And if
my goodness.
go back to those family systems, right? Everybody raised their family system. If you were part of a family system that no meant no, sit your ass down and be quiet, versus family system like no, come back with me with something that makes sense. Those are ways to think about it, right? And
that is genius. I've never thought about that. Yes,
right.
Very good point. Yeah.
You're pulling that in, and so it's okay. You need somebody who has the personality to carry on an idea. We all need this. That is absolutely right. But if you have, without having a system, to your point, particularly in the academic space, without having a system that teaches people that risk is okay, that we're going to teach you how to manage risk. We're going to run this as a science experiment. We're going to take everything you ever learned about how to trace an idea from inception to through execution, through disposition. That reduces the risk. Now, it doesn't make it any less risky that your idea may not work, but you're trying to reduce the risk for that to happen.
Yeah.
There are certain jobs that you don't want that risk. You don't want to have you want to have the experimentation, but you don't want somebody who's just like, oh, let's give it a shot, who's building nuclear weapons. You don't want that, right? It doesn't make any sense. But if you're trying to build a business, if you're trying to raise to create generational impact, right? Generational community impact, generational wealth, you can't just go work for somebody else, right? It just doesn't work that way. So I have two very different children. One is a computer science major who sits he gets entrepreneurship just full stop, but he's okay with working in a corporate setting because he knows that that's a next step. My oldest son, who is the engineering major, my other son's the engineering major, is like, I could never, ever, if I never see the inside of a corporation, it will never be too early, right? It will never be too early because his brain just could not hold it. And so he is actually working on what I think is one of those, we talked about like changing ideas, trying to find the $1 billion idea. He has one of those ideas. That's one of those $1 billion ideas. Now, whether or not it happens, I have no idea. But he's not afraid to experiment his way into it. And so if we could take that same thinking around experimentation, either one that's more on the exploit side of experimentation or one that's like fully on the explorer side of experimentation, and inculcate that with students, I think that what you do is you're not just training people to become entrepreneurs, you're training people to have entrepreneurial thinking. I considered myself an undergrad. I think earlier on in this show, I said, I don't know if I said I flunked out of college. I completely flunked out. Like, so I tell kids, when I deal with kids, not my own, but I deal with other kids, anybody can finish. It is a exercise in sticking to it, right? Just don't give up. I had a 0.9, a 1.4, and a 0.14. Those are my first 3 semesters in college, and I got kicked out. So for me, the idea that I came up with once I went back to the same college that I flunked out with, and this is before I even understood the term, I considered myself an academic entrepreneur. And it wasn't that I was building anything. I was just curious. Remember, curiosity, asking questions, humility, systems thinking, and there was one more, network, whatever the 4 or 5, right? So I can accelerate it. So it's not just a one-to-one. What would it look like if we had people who could think like entrepreneurs, just didn't do entrepreneurship?
Yeah.
Be a very different world.
Very different.
We wouldn't just have people who would follow.
So having a entrepreneurial thinking for students, I think is even a better option, right?
Yeah.
Than just having a syllabus. My wife, who teaches 8th grade math, and I think it starts all the way back there. As a matter of fact, there's some. I think it would be interesting to think about what happens with children between kindergarten and like 2nd grade.
Yeah.
Kindergarten, they ask a ton of questions. By 2nd grade, it's like, do this math problem.
Yes.
Right. And so how do we how do we remove kids from thinking like this? I think it's huge. It's hugely important, because now what we're doing is we're teaching kids that it doesn't, that we don't want you to think, we just want you to do. And so how do we bake in this kind of entrepreneurial question asking, being curiosity, all that stuff, humility, uncertainty, being okay with uncertainty, ambiguity, bake it in a world that is changing so rapidly, right? So rapidly.
Yeah. So how do we do that? I don't know.
I think it takes a lot of institutional courage to be able to do something like that. I mean, a lot of institutional courage. In the States, they have, there's several different kinds of academic for children. One's, I think it was Marie Montessori schools, where they just allow kids to just completely explore, just be curious. And then they get to public school and they're like, nope, we need to give you a grade, because that's the only way that we can measure whether or not you've learned anything.
Yes.
I don't know. I think it does come down to that, what Osterwalder articulates as the ambidextrous, explore, exploit. And it's funny because he has his diagram around it is a figure 8, is an infinite loop of a figure 8, that while you're exploring, it now moves to exploit. But after a while, exploit can only go so far because it loses energy. And then you have to go back and explore. In one of my guys and I, our podcast that we do, I got curious and we started talking about informational entropy. And that's where we're at right now. We're in a space where we think we have enough information. So now we create this thing called ChatGPT, right? Which is cool. My son was like, Dad, you got it. Dad, when it first came, he's like, Dad, you have got to take a look. This is crazy what this thing is, right? And even with GPTs, it can only go so far because it's limited by the language set that it's given. To find the large language models are like trying to find the intricacies between the connections between what seem like spurious ideas, but that's only as competent as the language system that it's given, the amount of information that's given. And so in human systems, the lack of curiosity creates information entropy. In entrepreneurial systems, the lack of customer discovery creates information entropy. So you think that you're solving the right thing, but you don't have enough information. Now, that doesn't mean you don't want to act on something. Yes, you absolutely do. You want to be in a position where you can say, I have enough information that I can actually build something that I think I have data that suggests the market is willing to hold on to. Cool.
Yeah.
Not a problem. But if you think that you can get that from 5 people, I am certain I got the right thing. Good luck with that.
Probably not.
Not at all.
But since now with AI, it might be a bit easier also to get that data or in general with tech. Do you think that we're going to move into more entrepreneurial work environments, especially also with the new generations wanting to have more purposeful lives and looking for a bit more meaning in what they're doing, and also are not really finding economically so much more rewards by joining companies? Do you see it that the new work environments are going to go more into the entrepreneurship in general?
I think that's as they say, the $64,000 question or the $1 million question. Because if you look at what's happening with, for instance, venture capital here in the States, right? And maybe venture capital worldwide, but the only data that I have right now is venture capital here in the States and where that money is going. My oldest son was like, Dad, he called me up the other day, Dad, we're about to have an AI pop. I was like, what are you talking about? We're about to reach a bubble stage, right? I think I saw something that said half of the venture capital that came out of Silicon Valley, probably more than half, went to companies building AI, right?
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do, what we're trying to do is create certainties. Yep.
Yeah.
And it's just going to keep looping and looping. And the certainty is the same certainty they thought with that they found with as probably as early as here in the States on major systems with car companies in the 1910s and like the early 1900s, 1910s. I think that I heard somewhere there was like 150 or 200 car companies in the United States. We now have 3, and that domestic car companies, right? Yeah. There was an infusion of all this cash and people rushing and gold rushing, trying to get it. I think it's the same thing, with it happened with the .com, it happened with the internet, all this stuff and AI. And so I'm wondering if it's less about the technology, to your point, like how do we get this? There's going to be a point where I think it's the human nature to have certainty, right? It's just human nature. We want to know exactly what's happening, and we'll go all in if somebody gives us a sense of what's happening is the right thing. I would suggest that happens not just in business; it happens politically, right? It happens how people socially and politically. We want certainty, and how do we go after certainty? We find one person who says, "I got it. I know what to do," and they're like, "I'm going to convince you." And people are like, yes, please don't make me think, right? Yeah. I don't want to think. I just want to do. Yes. And I think in some ways it goes all the way back to the way we're trained as children. We're trained to think and just do and not think. Because
Yeah.
if you do, then we can create economic certainty. What happens in the future for your generation as you come along and, and as you you get to be an old person like me. Although I feel both of my kids are under 22, 20 and 22, so I can't be so old, right?
No, you're not. You're not.
Thank you so much. God bless you. I appreciate you. That I think that what we're going to have to do, I don't think that time is on our side to not think like this, because the speed at which technology is changing is getting faster and faster. That silicon chip used to be a 6-month change is now, I met a young man who's building out, who can do rapid prototyping of silica chips, like cheap, like at 20 grand instead of a $500,000 process at $20,000, which is like,
wow.
Right. So he can do this pretty rapidly and figure it out like, oh, so I can make all these changes without having to spend a ton of money. And that's just on his experiment. Just imagine when he could do it at scale. So the money he can do this even more rapidly at a cheaper cost. And I think it's the same thing in our entrepreneurial systems, that if we don't embrace this, the calcification of economies will go, it'll just overwhelm our systems, because we don't have the capacity to break, as we find something, break it off and explore it, see if it works, and then rapidly adjust our systems to where the economy is, where the market is. But the one saving grace that we have, and it's not the one saving grace, but a saving grace that we have, is strategy. Right?
Okay. Way more.
Making a choice, saying we will win. We're not going to be everything, but we're going to win here. We're not going to defend. We're not going to create a defensive posture, which is the exploit. We're going to create an offensive posture by saying we ain't going to play over here, but we will play over here, which too is explore. And so I think that we have economies that are looking for major scale, which is the reason why we only have 3 companies: Ford, Chrysler. That's it. Ford and Chrysler. I guess we're down to 2 major U.S. car companies. When 100 years ago, there were 200 car companies.
Wow.
Consolidation.
And this consolidation, because getting bigger also has these counterpoints of just being slower, and these massive companies, I just don't see them survive as much to adapting to all these changes that they have to do. And I can't see like this massive dinosaurs companies in the near future being as many as we used to have them. I don't know. What's your stand on this? Or maybe they do adapt quickly.
No. I don't know if they adapt. Right.
Okay.
I don't know. I think the ones that will survive will be able to see themselves as adaptive.
Okay.
One of the reasons why I like Blue Ocean strategy is that it allows companies to figure out what is a commodity and what's not commoditizable. Right. And that way you can go to where the uncommoditizable is, versus trying to beat somebody else out against a commodity. I think the globalized companies are trying to own the entire supply chain. Yes. But one of the things that I think early on that I really appreciated about OpenAI and artificial intelligence was the democratization. It democratized information. It democratized the capacity to explore something without dropping a ton of money. To watch a big consulting firm like McKinsey and Bain and Booz Allen and those companies having to pivot to say, the companies that we used to work for, that we would, provide it, would take us $1 million to provide a deck. They don't need us anymore.
No.
Right? They can do that on their own. All you need is a good person, a good imagination, and a great prompt engineer.
Yeah.
Right. And that's all you need. And I could get the same information that would take you $1 million. I can pay somebody, some really smart person, $250,000 a year. Right. And we can figure it out. And then I may invite you in. I may invite you back to help us figure out what this means, but I don't need you to do that. And so it is, I think that what we're experiencing, or what we're going to experience, is a strong shift in the way that we do work. And I think everybody's saying that. But in the way that we manage supply chain, I think everybody's saying that. But I also think it's going to influence the way that we think about our capacity to do systemic change. Not everybody is saying that, because that's somebody else does that. But if you bring in people who can really kind of advance, it's those that can have an imagination, that can think beyond the current. Blue ocean strategy. What do I get rid of? What do I reduce? What do I raise? And then what do I create? That are going to be the ones that will succeed. I'm working with some colleagues of mine right now. We're thinking about how do we support certain academic institutions when the leadership is like, they don't have the imagination to do that. They know what they know. And we're saying, you can't survive like this. You're playing, you're playing in a 1970s way going into the the mid 21st century. You have a 50-year-old way of thinking about the world. Stop. Doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah. So what do you do in those cases? Complicated.
So it's difficult, and I think part of it is this idea of systems that we talked about earlier. But there's also not just systems thinking, it's designing for human-centered design, I think is going to be even more important in this space. Because with human-centered design, what you end up with is the concern of the human, the understanding of the human, the capacity of the human to integrate change. And it's not being forced on them. It's they're being engaged with it. Because if it's forced on them, then it's our human thing. Like, I ain't paying attention to you. I'm going to just do my thing. Versus I am engaged in the change. I am engaged. And so it's not just my rational, right? And I think part of the, I don't know if you've ever interviewed or studied behavioral economics or interviewed anybody who does behavioral economics, but the economic monster, the economic man, is supposed to be a rational actor.
Yeah.
None of us ever make a choice that's rational.
No.
None of us.
No.
We never. But we behave as if that's the thing.
Oh, wow. That's a good one. We believe that we
believe that we've made rational choices. So if you go back earlier in this podcast, in this conversation, we're bring us full circle. We're bringing all of those people, all of those experiences from the time we were children to our everyday engagement. We're doing it right now. Tell me that's rational. That is completely irrational, but it's real.
And why do we think that it's rational? Is it because we were taught like that things are rational and we need to kind of think about our rational decisions and stuff?
So if we were to say, oh, that was completely irrational, what does that say about me?
Yeah,
I'm crazy. Exactly. Exactly. And I don't want to be crazy. I don't want to have to deal with the fact that I made a choice. And that's why people go to therapy. because they come to some sense like that wasn't cool. I need somebody to help me unpack this idea. But that's the individual. What does it mean to do that in the aggregate of an organization? That's why you have some of the stuff that I've done and continue to do with the organization, the A.K. Rice Institute for the Study of Social Systems. We don't do like overt consulting right now. Like somebody could hire the A.K. Rice Institute, but they could hire people who've been trained to come in and say,
Okay.
well, do you realize this is kind of a nutty behavior, right? Where'd that come from? To help people get to the kind of unspoken, because if you can get to the unspoken, now if I can get to the irrational and deal with the irrational, what does that do in it to advance the rational choice making? Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
It enhances my ability to make good rational choices engaged on the task of why we're even in the same room.
Yeah. Gosh, fascinating. You were mentioning in the beginning that it's sometimes hard to convince organizations, or not convince them, but make them be aware of the fact that they need to see things, right, from a different angle, maybe. Sometimes it's hard for organizations to see like, okay, we actually would need to put in some innovation because we need to let go of something old, because otherwise we're going to be obsolete in a matter of seconds nowadays. But how do you overcome that barrier that basically they see the need for you to step in and help them? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I spent 20 years supporting the national security enterprise here in the States. Not that I knew anything like classified. I mean, I had a clearance and all the rest of that stuff, but the powerful
Wow.
piece that I think that I brought to them is that I sat in the corner and didn't say much. Right. But when I made an observation, I went, I don't understand what that means. Because I hear what you're saying, but it doesn't make sense to me. And they go, okay, Smith, well, what do you think? Well, this is what makes sense to me, or this is what I have a question about. And it wasn't what I tried to do is to not make them feel bad, because it wasn't the intention. It was to help them question what their choices they were making and how they were thinking about an idea. I spent 20 years, and that's all I mean, for 20 years, it was like, I don't know what that means. Here's what I think that I'm hearing, because I don't know your business. I'm in your business, but I don't know your business. I sit on the periphery. I sit and listen to what you're saying, but I'm watching your interaction, and you say that you have certainty about the task, and you say you have certainty about the task, but they're going in opposite directions. Like, what's the Uber task? What's the larger task that you're trying to do?
Yeah.
And so I would ask those kinds of questions. And I think that systems that are in the midst of change, that are in the midst of either crafted change, they know that something has to happen, or external change, they're being acted on with good leadership that goes, okay, time out. We're all stuck. We need somebody else to come in and just help us. Those are the humility, again, which is one of the good traits, the humility to say, I have no idea. I have none. I think it's a powerful pull to help organizations that really, really want to do well. And I want to caveat this by saying, I don't think any organization, especially those inside of systems and leaders in those systems, come in wanting to do bad. I don't believe that at all. They want to do the best they can. Just sometimes there's a song that goes, I gave my all, but I guess my all wasn't good enough. Right. And I think those that can acknowledge that, you know what, we're just not quite there. We can
Yeah.
see it over there, but we don't have a clear path of where there is. Can you help us?
Yeah. 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 No, that's really fun. I am very happy to see whenever I see companies or systems or environments that can recognize that. Okay, we need that outside perspective. We need some help here. Yeah, I think it's just sometimes kind of hard to see from the inside, when you're in the midst of everything. And then like, okay, actually maybe it would be really cool to have this outside perspective, no? Even on an individual level, to go to a therapist can be very scary and be like, maybe it could be really nice to talk to someone.
I had a leader with an organization in that 20 years of supporting that community. He's like, yeah, Ty is our therapist. Miss Karen was like, Ty is she makes sure that we're maintaining our humanness, that we're just not cogs in a process, in a system, but that we have our humanity, that we maintain. And I think, now that I'm saying that, I think that it's an important piece of this. I just never thought about this, that I have, but I'm glad that we're having this in this context, is that the next successful company, just a thought, will be the one that can maintain its humanity.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Yes, I 100% agree.
Right? That we're just not beheld to technology, but we're able to hold our humanity in a way that we are not lost. We don't feel overwhelmed. We don't feel dismissed. We don't feel, in my mind, if you've ever seen the movie Matrix, that we're plugged into this larger machine, but that the Matrix was literally about unplugging to find one's humanity again. And I don't want to be apocalyptic at all about how this happens. But I think what I am suggesting is that those organizations that can find their human and the integration with this technology, which to me is a tool, it is not alive. I think that one of the things that we've done to our detriment is anthropomorphize technology. Silicon chips is electronics, right? It's electric. It's not alive. And once you anthropomorphize it, now you have to continue to feed it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
At the expense of humanity, of your humanness.
Yes. Thanks for making that distinction, because I think it's a very important one. Yeah, 100%. Someone that's listening and that would like to do something similar like you are, what would you suggest that person? What would you tell that person to go and do? Step into those footsteps.
I think one of the first things that any one person can do is just to ask questions, stay curious, right? Curiously honest. Or to say, I haven't the foggiest idea, and I am willing to feel my heart beat really fast.
Wow.
And stick with it, to allow my affect, this professor that I went to study with, who passed away too soon, I spoke about earlier. He said, to become a master of your craft, you have to be able to hold your affect and your intellect without privileging one for the other. So I need to be able to hold what's in my head and what's in my heart. F. Scott Fitzgerald said, the true genius, the hallmark of true genius, be able to hold two warring minds at the same time. Right? Paraphrased. Can somebody who's trying to do this, you don't have to do the stuff that I did. It's 58 years of learning. It is flunking out of college. It's, being a police officer at 18 years old, and the very first night you're on patrol by yourself, you have an accident.
Oh,
a theft and a suicide and all at the same time, your first night
oh
out.
my
You don't have to
goodness.
do that
Wow.
stuff. It doesn't have to be like that. But what
Mm,
you have to do is be forthright with how it impacts you. What's
mm,
the affectual
mm,
experience? Can I sit with it and go, my God, I don't know what that was, but I'm willing to
mm,
take the chance to go and explore it, to understand it, to unpack it, so I can
mm,
make it a part of who I am, so I can, in the service of, in the service of others, right? I think that what I try to do uh, every time I have a conversation, every time people say, "What can I do for you?" Oh, I have no idea, but I will say to somebody, "It's like, how can I be of service?" Um, and for me, the idea of being of service um, is important because it connects me to others without putting myself at the center. Even though it says, I think how can I be of service? What can I offer you to help you? It may sound a bit selfish, but it's not about me because my wife would say to a fault, I'm like, people's like, how can I help you? I'm like, I have no idea. I really don't, because it's not where I'm at. I end up having these kind of conversations with you or others where I literally will talk for 20 minutes to a founder. And I'm like, I don't know how to charge for a 20-minute conversation.
yeah.
And that's, doesn't do well for my pocketbook, with 2 kids in college and a mortgage to pay. But, and I know I help people think through ideas,
Mm,
but I don't think it's about that. And I'm wondering what the world would be like if I could be in service of others.
mm, I love that. Yeah, I was about to ask you, how do we do that in a world that's getting more and more expensive, where maybe sometimes we can't really allow ourselves to do that in a yeah in a just in a world where we gotta pay our bills and have some food on the table.
Yeah. So don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that everything is free, right?
No.
Because
Yes.
if I give you something, right,
Mm-hmm.
I can only allow you to go to the well so many times, right? If
Yeah.
I'm in service of, because then
Yeah.
it's not really about an exchange of ideas and thoughts and experiences. It's about, I can continue because you haven't charged me. I had a senior in my AK Rice work one time, and we're talking like 1996, so it's a long time ago. I said, hey, they want me to this particular school, this particular organization wants me to do this piece. They don't have any money. He's like, make them give you something, right?
Mm.
And he said, it's not about the pay, it's about their commitment to you,
Mm.
right?
That's right.
It's
Yeah.
about their commitment to you.
Mm.
And I think that has stuck with me, obviously, for a very long time. It's about what's people's commitment to the effort that I give, and
Mm.
my wanting them to be the best that they can be. Because I used to, I used to, I've been involved with track and field since I was 13. And for about 3 years, I used to coach post-collegiate athletes, a group of women,
Mm.
and I did it for free. And I mean, at some points, I would be pulling money out of my pocket to make, and even with my babies, I started with 8-year-olds and I worked my way up to people who are trying to run in Olympic trials and whatnot. But um, it their commitment to me was their ability to give back. And some of them have just gone on and just done it because that's what I was
Mm.
willing to do. They would
Yeah.
one of my athletes said, Coach Ty, one of the things that I really like about you that makes you a great coach is that you don't know everything. You actually listen to us. It's like, because I can't know everything because I'm not sitting in your body every day. I don't know who you are. I mean, I have a plan, but my plan is only as good as your execution. Right. And so, I think helping people just really hold on to um, I think helping people hold on to their humanity, what it means, how they want to engage in the world, how they want to be seen in the world, and asking for um, reciprocity in a way
Mm,
that is not demanded but is given.
mm. I love that. I love that a lot. Um, Moving already into the more ending questions, what is
Mhm.
something that has recently surprised you? And what is something that you're working on right now?
Recently surprised me.
Mm,
I don't know if it's a surprise as much as it is like, I thought so, is to
mm.
watch my sons become men,
Wow. Tell me more about
right?
that. I'm curious.
Um, if there's any parents that are listening to this,
Mm,
you'll recognize that have older kids that are like teenagers and beyond. There's a point at which, and it's developmental. It's appropriately
mm,
developmental. Like, I got this. I got this. I know how to do this. I don't need your help. Okay. I don't need your help. But to watch them kind of become their adult best selves and
mm.
go, Dad, I appreciate you. And they'll call me and they'll just talk. Sometimes I'm like, stop talking to me. You're getting on my nerves. Um, but there's other times when I'm like, yeah, this is kind of dope, right? That they're actually reaching back out and that they just want to talk, right?
Mm,
And that they trust me. The thing that I'm working on is from a kind of professional is what would it look like as I reached starting my, 2 years from now, I'll be 60 years old. I don't feel it. Hopefully I don't look it. I don't
no,
experience myself as
definitely.
60. Because it feels really weird in my ears when I say, "Oh, I'm 50." I'm like, "What?
Yeah. That happens.
Yeah, yeah. Where'd that go from? Is
Yeah.
the thing that I'm working on is how to build my own practice in a way that and come to some resolution that what I know is respected enough that people will pay me, right?
Mm,
Without me going, yeah, I don't know, I don't understand it yet, even
yeah.
at this late stage in life. Like, people pay me for this? It's just fascinating. And then I look at and part of it is, I that I have to come to some resolution with is I look at what other people do and try not to
Mm,
compare myself, but I'm like, what? I've forgotten more than I remember around how to do this work. Literally, I've
yeah.
forgotten more than I remember. Right. And and then I look at what's out there and what other folks do. I'm like, wow, they're getting paid for that. So I'm
Yeah.
working on my worth. Right.
Mm. Yeah, it always comes back to that, isn't it? That we allow ourselves to be paid for also we what comes easy to us. No, and sometimes it just feels so weird to
Yep.
ask for money for something that just feels I'm not doing anything for this. I'm just, yeah, asking questions or not knowing. And just then, of course, that has such, I mean, the whole podcast, everything that you've shared is such valuable knowledge that I think we all can learn so much from. And yet we kind of sometimes think like, well, I'm not doing anything special here, and why should someone pay me for this? But then someone else is coming along and just, yeah, gets paid for that. And you're like, well, actually, why not? Yes, of course.
Exactly. Exactly. So, that's what I'm working on. Like, how do
Beautiful.
I monetize my own what's
Mm.
in my head, and it's been rolling around in my head since I was probably 15 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no. And yeah, I think that's something that we all struggle with, but it's great to be as vulnerable as you are and open up about that, because I think we all struggle with that, but barely anyone talks about it openly, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Of course.
Um, how do you see the world in 5 to 10 years? Where do you think we're gonna be?
Hmm. S- So, at the risk of bifurcating the world, like either or,
Yeah.
um, and then hope, either or,
Mm.
and then hope.
Oh, I
Either
love that.
we will have, either we will have figured out that um, the planet is so small that
Mm.
we can't get out of each other's way,
Mm.
or we'll make space for our own selves to the detriment of humanity. Right.
Okay.
So we'll either figure it out
Either,
that we need to
yeah.
collaborate, or we'll
Yes.
create space that we don't need to. My hope is that we find leadership that is uh, capable of putting its best self forward.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
that we can find a space where dialogue can be honest
Mm.
and powerful, and not tear each other apart, because um, we all come from a place. We all come from families where we had a role, and some of us had a more um, gracious role,
Mm.
and some of us had a more traumatic role. But when
Mm.
we understand how that has influenced who we are as humans with each other, we might actually be able to do something wonderful
Mm.
for and with each other.
Oh, yeah. I think that really ties into the next question of what is the new world in the making for you?
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, the podcast is called New World in the Making, and I think everyone has a different interpretation or understanding of that new world that we are creating and that is emerging right now. Um, and what is that for you? What would you say to that?
Thank you for the clarifying. I In the world where I live here in the United States,
Yeah,
as a Black man in America who
yeah.
has a cultural history, some of it is very connected. So, for instance, my grandmother, who just passed about 10 years ago, was born in 1923, 1925. My grandfather was born in 1920. She was born in 25. He was born in 23. She
Mm.
remembers, and she told me, so this is not like reading a history book. Her grandmother, who was a child of the slave master in South Carolina,
Mm.
brushing her hair, which was long, and her grandmother telling her stories about the brutality, the trauma that which would have been my probably four great grandmothers ago. Grandmother,
Mm.
should grandmother. So probably three grandmothers ago, who was born
Mm.
into slavery, right?
Wow. I think it's
Right? Born into slavery. The trauma that's associated with that has been passed on either through my dad, through me. Hopefully I can intervene for my children.
Mm-hmm.
To have a world, what's emerging, the change in the world that's for me is that we can have these conversations as honest and open dialogues and not recrimination. In South Africa during the reconciliations, they figured it out where they could have these honest dialogues where fact became fact and not a place for where fact was fact, and that allowed for a new way of thinking about the world. And for me, it's about thinking about a new way. So at one point, my grandchildren will be able to hear the stories about their great, 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 great grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
who was the child of the slave master. Their grandfather, me, could do stuff around the world and understand what that means.
Yeah.
But that we do that not just for families, that we do that for the society, because that's the hope. You asked me about hopes and fears, like
Yeah.
what's good, but that's the hope.
Right. Right. And what do we need for that? What do we need to do for that? What are maybe paradigms that we need to embrace more of?
Curiosity and humility.
Right. Back to the basics.
It is. Yep. Back to the basics. There's nothing else that can be. If you aren't curious, and if you don't maintain a sense of humility, doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Then it becomes an observation that doesn't. It's just an observation. It's a point in history.
Yeah.
That can either be said, wasn't me. I can deny it. I don't believe it.
Mm-hmm. Great. Would you like to add something that we haven't covered before we go into the last question?
I appreciate you having creating a space for these conversations to happen. I think it's important, particularly you being in Spain. You're in Spain. Spain.
Yes,
You being in Spain and you reaching out to me at 9:00 in the morning here on the East Coast time, and I don't even know what time it is. I think you're 5 hours ahead, and you're like all this stuff. But reaching out and having these, having the courage to have these trans-boundary conversations, a young person to an older person, even though I don't feel like it.
No, doesn't feel like one. More wisdom there.
I think it's important, and I would encourage you to continue.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you saying that. Because I mean, it's what you were saying earlier as well. It's sometimes hard to value that, and then it just feels right. So it just makes sense for me to do this. And I really believe that we need these conversations. We need to open up and have that humility and curiosity. So I mean, that's all what this podcast at the end of the day is about. Because I would like to understand better and make it available to more people. And
Awesome.
that's why also I always end with the question of the question. That is, if you could leave the listeners with a question that they can reflect upon.
So I've never, all the podcasts I've ever done, I've never had this before. It's always like, what do you have last thoughts on that? Blah, 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 and I just say whatever I say. But leave a question. It has something in my mind. The thing that's formulating has something to do with curiosity and humility. right?
Mm-hmm.
And it would be something along the line, what's the most thing that you're curious about, and what are you willing to do to explore it?
Love it. Yeah. That is, I think that really crosses as well the fear that we talked in the beginning. Curiosity in the end is just a massive motivator to go and figure that out. So yeah,
Hmm.
thanks a lot.
You're very welcome. This was fun.